3 days ago, I was Dr. Evelyn Reed, 30, the celebrated mind behind a cure for cancer, standing in an emerald gown at a gala held in my honor. Today I'm just Evelyn, staring at two pink lines on a pregnancy test in a gas station bathroom. My family framed me, my fiancé betrayed me, and my billion-dollar breakthrough was stolen by the brother who just took a victory lap on national news. They left me with nothing, exiled and broke. What they didn't count on? A mother has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to overcome the impossible, especially for your family. Trust me, you're going to want to hear what happens next. I stood in the glittering heart of the Vance estate, my heels sinking slightly into the plush carpet of the grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers threw rainbows across the room, catching on champagne flutes and diamond cufflinks. The air smelled of old money and new ambition, a mix of jasmine perfume and the sharp tang of power. I smoothed the silk of my emerald gown, feeling like an imposter in my own life. Around me, Research Triangle Park's elite swirled. Biotech moguls, southern aristocrats, and politicians who smiled like they'd already won. My family's company, Vance Biosystems, was the star of the night, and I, Dr. Evelyn Reed, was its quiet engine. My brother Landon held court near the stage, his laugh booming as he clapped a senator on the back. His tailored suit screamed CEO, and his charm was a weapon, disarming everyone in its path. Camilla, my sister, glided through the crowd, her pearl-white dress glowing under the lights. As head of the Vance Foundation, she was the family's polished face, her smile a promise of charity and grace. My fiancé, Julian Croft, stood beside me, his hand warm on my lower back. "You're the real star tonight, Ev," he whispered, his attorney's voice smooth as bourbon. I wanted to believe him. My work, the Leora Protocol, was the reason for this gala, a gene-editing breakthrough that could detect and neutralize cancer markers before they became threats. Years of my life, poured into petri dishes and data, were about to change the world. But I felt small, like a shadow in my own story. Landon and Camilla were the sun and moon of the Vance dynasty, while I was the workhorse, the scientist who stayed late in the lab while they took the stage. My father, Richard, watched from a corner, his gray eyes scanning the room like a hawk. My mother, Eleanor, fluttered nearby, her laughter a little too bright. I was used to being invisible to them, but tonight, I thought, maybe they'd see me. 3 days later, I walked into the family study expecting a toast to my work. The room was heavy with the scent of polished mahogany and old leather. My family sat around the long table, Richard at the head, Eleanor to his right, Landon and Camilla flanking him like sentinels. Julian was there too, his face unreadable. My stomach twisted. This wasn't a celebration. "Evelyn," my father said, his voice like gravel. He slid a folder across the table. "Explain this." I opened it, my hands trembling. Bank statements, emails, contracts, all forged, all in my name. They claimed I'd siphoned $250,000 from R&D funds into an offshore account. Worse, they accused me of trying to sell the Leora Protocol to a rival company. My chest tightened, the air thinning. "This isn't real," I said, my voice cracking. "I didn't do this." Landon leaned forward, his eyes cold. "The board has seen the evidence, Evelyn. It's airtight." Camilla's voice was softer but no less sharp. "You've always been reckless. We can't risk the company's reputation." I looked to Julian, my anchor. "Julian, you know me. Tell them this is a mistake." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low, "the evidence is overwhelming. For the good of the family, you need to step away." The room spun. My family, my blood, sat united against me. Landon delivered the final blow. "You're terminated, disinherited, be out of the guesthouse by morning." I stumbled out of the study, my world collapsing. The Leora Protocol, my life's work, was stolen. My family, my fiancé, my future, they'd turned on me like I was nothing. I wasn't just disowned, I was erased. The motel room smelled of stale cigarette smoke and despair. I sat on the sagging bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper, my life reduced to a duffel bag and a cracked phone screen. My corporate cards were frozen, my bank accounts locked. The Vance name, once my shield, was now a blade at my throat. Raleigh's humid air pressed against the window, mocking me with its freedom. I was a ghost, invisible to the world I'd helped build. For a week, I barely moved. I didn't eat, didn't sleep, just replayed that meeting in my head. Landon's cold eyes, Camilla's fake pity, Julian's betrayal. I'd given them everything, my work, my loyalty, my heart, and they'd thrown me away. I was the black sheep. Always had been. But I'd thought my science would be enough. I was wrong. I woke one morning to nausea so fierce I barely made it to the bathroom. Kneeling on the cold tile, I thought it was just stress. But something nagged at me. A quiet instinct. I bought a pregnancy test from a gas station, my hands shaking as I paid with crumpled bills. Back in the motel, I stared at the 2 pink lines, my breath caught. This wasn't Julian's baby. It was from a night months ago, a fleeting moment with Dr. Samuel Carter, my old mentor. We'd been grieving a failed trial, sharing whiskey and regrets. It was a mistake, but now it was my reality. Terror hit first. I was alone, broke, with no one to turn to. But then something shifted. I placed a hand on my stomach, feeling the tiniest spark of life. This baby, maybe babies I'd learn later, was mine. Not the Vance family's, not Julian's, but mine. For the first time in days I felt something other than pain. Purpose. I dug through my bag, finding the encrypted hard drive Sam had given me months ago. For safekeeping, he'd said, his voice heavy with meaning I hadn't understood then. I clutched it like a lifeline. Sam was my only shot. He'd been exiled too, years ago, by my father's machinations. If anyone could understand, it was him. I found him in a cramped office at a community college, surrounded by stacks of ungraded papers. His hair was grayer than I remembered, his eyes tired. "Evelyn," he said, leaning back in his chair, "you look like hell." "They took everything," I said, my voice raw. "My work, my family, my life. I need your help." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "The Vances don't just win, Evelyn, they destroy. You're playing with fire." I held up the hard drive. "This is my work, the Leora Protocol. It's not theirs. I can prove it." He stared at me, then at the drive. Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe, or defiance. "All right," he said finally. "But we're not doing this alone." Sam's apartment was a mess of books and takeout containers, but it felt like a sanctuary compared to the motel. He poured me coffee, black and bitter, and started making calls. "You're not the only one they've burned," he said, his voice low. "There's a network. People like us. Pharma ghosts." I didn't know what to expect, but over the next few days, they started showing up. A biochemist who'd been blacklisted after whistleblowing. An engineer whose patents were stolen. A data analyst who'd been framed for fraud. They were brilliant, broken people, each with a story like mine. We met in a borrowed basement, our voices hushed, our plans scribbled on a whiteboard. It felt like a resistance movement, not a lab, but the odds were crushing. Vance Biosystems was a juggernaut, and we were a ragtag crew with no money, no resources, and no time. Landon's press conference was looming, where he'd unveil my work as his own. Every day, I felt the clock ticking louder. My pregnancy was starting to show, a secret I kept from the group. I was terrified they'd see me as a liability, just like my family had. One night, I sat alone in the basement, staring at the hard drive. Doubt crept in. What if I was wrong? What if I couldn't win? I was one woman against an empire. My hand drifted to my stomach and I whispered, "I'm doing this for you." It was a promise, to my baby and to myself. Sam found me there, his face softer than usual. "You're carrying a lot, Evelyn," he said, "not just the kid." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." He sat beside me, his presence steady. "You're stronger than you think, and you're not alone anymore." The next day, we got to work. The biochemist, Lila, decoded my raw data, her eyes lighting up at its elegance. The engineer, Marcus, rigged a makeshift server to keep our files secure. The analyst, Priya, started tracing the forged financials, looking for cracks in the Vance armor. We were a team, fragile, but fierce. For the first time I felt a spark of hope, like I wasn't just fighting for survival but for something bigger. Then, a small miracle. Sorting through my bag, I found a tarnished silver locket from my grandmother, the only Vance who'd ever seen me. I almost tossed it, but something made me pause. I pried it open, revealing a hidden clasp. Inside was a micro-SD card. My hands shook as I plugged it into Sam's laptop. My grandmother's voice filled the room, strong and clear. "They will try to break you, my firefly. I made copies." The card held my original research, watermarked and time-stamped, plus audio of her confronting my father about his history of stealing ideas. It was a weapon and it was mine. The basement smelled of damp concrete and instant coffee, our makeshift war room lit by flickering fluorescent bulbs. We were a band of exiles. Lila, Marcus, Priya, Sam, and me, huddled around a folding table, our laptops humming like co-conspirators. My grandmother's micro SD card sat in the center, a talisman of hope. Its contents were gold. My watermarked research and her damning audio, proof that the Vance Empire was built on lies. But hope was a fragile thing and time was our enemy. Landon's press conference was in 10 days, where he'd parade my Leora Protocol as his own. We had to move fast, but we were running on fumes, borrowed Wi-Fi, burner phones, and sheer stubbornness. I was exhausted, my body heavy with the weight of pregnancy and betrayal. Every night, I'd lie on a cot in the corner, one hand on my stomach, whispering to my twins. Yes, twins, I'd learned at a free clinic. "We're gonna make it," I'd say, as if saying it could make it true. But doubt gnawed at me. The Vances were untouchable, their influence woven into every corner of Research Triangle Park. My family's reach was a noose, tightening with every move we made. We hit our first wall when Priya tried leaking a piece of my research to an investigative journalist she trusted. The story was killed within hours, replaced by a puff piece about Camilla's latest charity gala. A cease and desist letter followed, signed by Julian's law firm. My stomach churned at his name. He wasn't just complicit, he was their weapon. "They're watching us," Priya said, her voice tight. "Every move." Sam slammed his fist on the table. Then we stopped playing defense. His eyes burned with the kind of fire I hadn't seen since our days in the lab together. "We need to hit them where it hurts, publicly, undeniably." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Marcus, our engineer, had a contact from his old life, a grizzled hacker named Quinn who owed him a favor. Quinn got us an anonymous slot at the Biotech Summit in San Diego, scheduled the day after Landon's press conference. It was a long shot, but it was our shot. The plan was simple. Let Landon take the stage, let him bask in stolen glory, then I'd step into the spotlight and tear it all down with the truth. I spent nights preparing, my fingers trembling as I rehearsed my presentation. The data was airtight, the audio devastating. But fear clung to me like damp clothes. What if they silenced me before I could speak? What if I failed my twins, my team, myself? Sam caught me pacing one night, my eyes red from crying. "You're not just fighting for you," he said softly. "You're fighting for every one of us they've crushed." His words were a lifeline pulling me back from the edge. We worked like fugitives, moving between libraries and coffee shops to avoid detection. My body ached. Twin pregnancies weren't kind, but I pushed through, fueled by adrenaline and the memory of my grandmother's voice. "They will try to break you, my firefly. I wouldn't let them." Lila refined my data into a presentation that could cut glass, every slide a dagger aimed at Vance Biosystems. Marcus built a secure server to protect our files, his hands steady despite the Red Bull cans piling up around him. Priya traced the forged financials, finding threads that led to a shell company. We didn't have the full picture yet, but we were close. The summit was our endgame, but the closer it got, the more exposed I felt. I'd catch myself looking over my shoulder, half expecting Julian or one of Camilla's PR goons to appear. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford, replaced by nightmares of losing everything again. One morning I woke to a text from an unknown number. "Stop now or you'll regret it." I showed it to Sam, my heart pounding. He deleted it without a word, his jaw tight. "They're scared," he said. "That means we're winning." But winning felt distant. The Vances' influence was a hydra, cut one head and two more appeared. Camilla's PR machine churned out stories painting Landon as a visionary, while I was erased, my name absent from every article. It was like I'd never existed. The loneliness hit hardest at night when the team went home and I was alone with my thoughts and my twins. I'd talk to them, my voice barely a whisper. "We're gonna take it all back," I'd say, rubbing my belly. "For you." Then, a spark of light. Priya found a discrepancy in the shell company's records, a name buried in the paperwork. Julian Croft. My fiancé, the man who'd looked me in the eye and called me a traitor, was tied to the embezzled funds. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a setup. My blood boiled, but it was the kind of anger that sharpened my focus. We had him. We had them. Sam called in another favor, getting us a projector and a secure laptop for the summit. Lila polished my slides until they gleamed. Marcus rigged a backup server in case we were hacked. We were ready, or as ready as we'd ever be. The night before we flew to San Diego, Sam handed me a burner phone. "For emergencies," he said. "You're not alone, Evelyn." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. For the first time, I believed him. San Diego was a blur of palm trees and glass towers, but I barely saw it. The summit was tomorrow, and today was Landon's press conference. I sat in our cheap hotel room watching the livestream on Priya's laptop. Landon stood on a sleek stage, his smile dazzling as he unveiled the Leora Protocol, my Leora Protocol, as his own. The crowd ate it up, their applause a knife in my gut. He was a thief in a tailored suit, and the world called him a hero. I wanted to scream, to smash the screen, but I sat frozen, my hands clenched around a glass of water. Backstage at the summit, I was a wreck. Nausea rolled through me, my twins restless as if they felt my fear. My dress was simple, black, nothing like the emerald gown from the gala. I didn't belong here among the polished biotech elite. My team was scattered. Sam in the audience, Lila and Marcus monitoring our servers, Priya tracking media coverage. I was alone, waiting for my slot as the special guest. My heart pounded so loud I thought it would drown out everything else. I checked my slides for the 100th time, my grandmother's audio queued up. The evidence was ironclad, but doubt whispered, "What if they don't believe you? What if they laugh?" My phone buzzed, a text from Sam. "Their victory is a stage play. Your truth is a force of nature. Let it roar." I read it again, until the words sank into my bones. He was right. I wasn't the broken woman they'd thrown away. I was a scientist, a mother, a fighter. The stage manager called my name. My legs shook as I walked toward the spotlight, the weight of my twins grounding me. The crowd murmured, curious but skeptical. I wasn't Landon Vance with his charisma and name. I was Evelyn Reed, the nobody they'd tried to erase. But as I stepped onto the stage, something shifted. The fear melted, replaced by a cold, burning resolve. I wasn't here to beg for their approval. I was here to take back what was mine. I gripped the podium, my voice steady. "Good afternoon. I'm here to talk about integrity in science, and what happens when it's stolen." The room went silent. I clicked to my first slide, and I began. The spotlight burned my skin, but I stood tall, my voice cutting through the silence of the San Diego summit. The crowd of biotech titans, journalists, and investors leaned forward, their eyes locked on me. I didn't look at the front row where I knew my family sat. Landon, Camilla, my parents. I didn't need to. This wasn't about them anymore, it was about the truth. My slides glowed on the massive screens behind me, each one a piece of my soul, my Leora Protocol laid bare. "Science demands integrity," I said, my words steady despite the storm inside me. "But integrity can be stolen, just like discoveries." I clicked through my data, showing the elegance of my work. Years of sleepless nights, failed trials, and breakthroughs no one else could claim. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others scribbling notes. Then came the moment I'd been building toward. "This protocol," I said, "was presented yesterday as a Vance Biosystems innovation, but it's mine." I displayed my original files, watermarked and timestamped, side by side with Landon's slides. The plagiarism was undeniable, the room electric with shock. I didn't stop there. "Integrity isn't just about science," I said. "It's about accountability." I played my grandmother's audio, her voice sharp and unwavering as she confronted my father about his history of intellectual theft. Gasps rippled through the audience. I could feel my family's eyes boring into me, but I kept going. The final blow was the financial trail Priya had uncovered, projected for all to see. The embezzled $250,000 funneled not to me but to a shell company owned by Julian Croft, my former fiancé. The man who'd called me a traitor. The room erupted. Reporters swarmed the front row, cameras flashing as my family tried to retreat. Landon's charm crumbled, Camilla's polish cracked, and my father's stoic mask shattered. I didn't watch. I didn't need to. The truth was out, a force no one could stop. I stepped off the stage, my legs trembling, and slipped through a side door. Sam was waiting, his face lit with pride. "You did it, Evelyn," he said, pulling me into a hug. I leaned into him, exhausted but free, the weight of years lifting off my shoulders. Outside, the world felt different, like the air itself had changed. I was still pregnant, still broke, still a target, but I was no longer invisible. The chaos I'd left behind was theirs to face. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. 6 months later, the dust had settled, but the scars remained. The legal battle was brutal, but swift. My evidence was ironclad, and the public fallout forced Vance Biosystems to retract their claim to the Leora Protocol. The patent was mine again, won in a landmark settlement that stripped my family of their stolen glory. Julian was disbarred, his name toxic in legal circles. I didn't gloat. I didn't have the energy. Every ounce of me was poured into what came next. I stood in the doorway of Leora Labs, a modest building on the edge of Raleigh, its walls buzzing with possibility. No chandeliers, no galas, just a team of brilliant misfits, the pharma ghosts who'd become my family. Lila was running experiments in the lab, her laugh echoing down the hall. Marcus tinkered with equipment, muttering about upgrades. Priya crunched data, her focus unshakable. Sam, now my COO, was at my side, his steady presence a constant reminder that I wasn't alone. The lab was funded by a group of female angel investors, women who'd seen my presentation at the summit and believed in me. One was the first investor from a speed pitch event I'd almost skipped, another was the judge who'd presided over my case. They didn't just give me money, they gave me trust. It was enough to start small, to build something real. My twins, Lucas and Alara, were my anchors. They were born 3 months ago, their tiny faces a mirror of hope and defiance. I'd rock them to sleep each night, whispering promises of a better world. Today, they napped in matching bassinets in the corner of my office, their soft breaths a quiet rhythm as I worked. I stood at a whiteboard, sketching a new research pathway, my marker squeaking against the board. The Leora Protocol was just the beginning. There were more questions to answer, more lives to save. Sam walked in, carrying 2 coffees, 1 decaf for me. He glanced at the board, then at the twins, a rare smile softening his face. "Ready for the next revolution, Dr. Reed?" he asked. I looked from the equations to my babies, then back to him. A smile spread across my face, real and fierce. "I'm just getting started," I said. The sun streamed through the window, painting the room gold. Outside, the world waited, not the old world of galas and betrayals, but a new one, built on my terms. I didn't need the Vance name anymore, I had my own. The camera in my mind panned out, past the whiteboard, past Lucas and Alara to the horizon. A new day was rising, and I was ready to meet it. I learned the hardest lesson of my life in that sterile boardroom. Blood isn't always thicker than water. But in a damp basement surrounded by outcasts, I learned that the family you choose is stronger than the one you're born into. If you feel alone, remember that your people are out there, the ones who will see your fight and stand beside you, not in your shadow. My advice? Cherish those who believe in you when you've been given every reason not to. Tag someone in the comments who has been your unshakable support system.